So let me introduce you to a website that has a lot of the material, and then we're going to keep an educational conversation going throughout this time. So if you go to Reimagining Migration, I think the easiest way to find the material is to search 100% American. We called this 100% American, the Ku Klux Klan and immigration in the 20s, as you can see. And the site's built pretty simply, actually. There is a historical essay that covers a lot of the material that Jill just talked about. As a matter of fact, Jill wrote it. And then Jill and not myself, but primarily Jill, because she's amazing, has collected wonderful primary sources, which we're going to be exploring a few of them in just a moment. And then we've written some teaching ideas to give you some thoughts on how you might address this in the classroom. But I think it's really important to recognize that as you start to bring these ideas into your own classroom, I think your own comfort level matters a lot here. I think your knowledge of the material matters a lot here, and your knowledge of your students and your ability to, build a relationship, because this stuff is hard. I think it's emotionally hard, and it both reinforces some ideas, but also challenges them, right? I think some of us are struggling. How do I understand, the Klan, which is historically we think of as primarily targeting African Americans, and that is true, and at the same time, there has been a deep strain of anti-immigrant hate, a deep strain of anti-Catholic hate historically, although somebody pointed out that there are some Catholics in the Klan now, and that's true. I don't have a sense of the percentage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you in. So I'm just give you something. Here's what the primary source page looks like. So we have a little bit of a note about what your learning goals are here always, because I think it's really important that we don't just do this as a voyeuristic teaching, but we actually understand why we're trying to do this. So for us, the goals we're working on are building an understanding of how the public messages of migration and how hate was part of these public stories, to help people inquire about the ways that messages about migration influence both the way people think and behave, and again, to identify these patterns of prejudice. Denzil mentioned this earlier. I'm going to take us to a PowerPoint, because what I'd like us to do now is to spend some time on some of this, spend some time on some of the individual resources, if I can. So we're going to back up just a moment. So again, as a teacher, I think it's really important when you explore this, as I've said, we have a sense of our educational purpose. So for me, one really good essential question to use when exploring this in this particular period is, what is the danger when hate groups become mainstream? Right? As Jill said, we're talking about somewhere close to 25% of the population of Indiana at this time. So what's the danger of when hate groups go mainstream? My suggestion of some guiding questions as you explore this history are, how did the Ku Klux Klan influence immigration policy in the 20s? How did they market their white supremacist agenda? And what are the echoes of their agenda and their language that are present today? So I've discussed kind of the larger term learning goals that you might keep underneath this. I think, look, everybody has their own standards. Everybody has their own classes where they're teaching this. But I really, really strongly suggest when you're teaching about something that can be as difficult as this, where you would like to go. So what I'd like to do is take a look at an image. This is an ad that Jill actually pulled up before. So this is an ad that ran in the Fiery Cross. And what I'd like to do is look at it using a thinking routine from Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I'm saying this to my colleagues. While I share it, I can't see the chat as cleanly. So what I'm going to ask you to do, is help keep me informed in what's in the chat a little bit. So what we're going to do is a thinking routine that's called See, Feel, Think, and Wonder. So the first thing I want you to do is to let's just describe what you see as objectively as possible looking at this image here, and just jot it in the chat box. What do you see? It's a car ad, Clara says. Free inspection for an American car. you see 100% pro-American salesman. Somebody's saying something that we would see today. They see 100% American. It's for the Ford car company. Yeah, so Christian says you'd exclude non-Americans. There's patriotism. All right, great. Free to get your car inspected. You're being rewarded for being American. A lot of italics. It's true. Yes, it doesn't mention race. No African Americans wanted, although it doesn't say it, right? It's the language here is, we solicit, I'm just going to slow that language down, right? We solicit the patronage of 100% Americans who prefer being served by 100% workmen. So what do they see? Yeah. Jalane says prefer. It's an interesting word, right? You know. So now let me ask, as you look at something like this, what are some of the things that you're feeling when you're looking at an ad like this? So if you go from seeing to feeling, what are you feeling? Loretta is saying encourage people to be exclusive. So, cringe. Wondering what exactly is 100% American, feeling like an outsider, not wanted, you know, disappointed, hurt, feel excluded. The dog whistle is blowing, weird, yeah, sick, not wanted, discrimination. So we're thinking about emotion, right? Now, what are you thinking? Let's go to the cognitive. What are you thinking when you see this? What makes them 100% American? I felt America was about to fall, that they have a lot of power. How did Ford react? It's a little complicated story about Ford. I will not do that here. 100% is not a real thing. Yes, absolutely, right? I mean, these people's ancestors, they were all parts of migration stories. Billy's saying, I see hypocrisy. I'm thinking about hypocrisy. What's the goal? I think that they're, you know, radical terrorists or racial terrorists. The workmen aren't immigrants, lies. So, okay, what do you wonder now? What might be something that you wonder? So we've done see, feel, think. Now might be, what are you wondering? So can I take my car there? That's an interesting, and would you want to? As a first generation, I wouldn't want that service. How can people believe this? I'm wondering how they vet customers who come in. I wonder, why do they hate? How successfully was this for them, right? These people are intentionally taking out an ad in a Klan newspaper. You know, somebody Irish Catholic, am I an American, right? Why was this so emotionally comforting? So what do you think I'm just wondering, I'll tell you what I'm wondering. I'm wondering at the impact of reading a piece like this. Is this an invitation to some? To some people say, look, these are folks like me. So
Adam, can I just make one more connection that I'm kind of seeing other people get near?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to say, let me start my video. I think it's important to make the note that this is an example of real world consequences of this hate speech, that this has like economic consequences, in that they're not just pandering to Klan members to come get their car serviced, but they're also saying that the workers are 100% American, as in not immigrants, which means that jobs like this were closed to them.
Yeah. So just to give you a sense of what this looks like bigger, right? So this isn't just one thing. So, you know what, again, I'm not going to spend as much time on this image, but some of the things that you find here, and again, Jill's my teacher on this particular one, but look at the clever advertising, or not really so clever, right? Keep clean coal. Get it? You know, it's a message. You're part of us. You're figuring out the game. You can decode the story. You can go to the Congress cafeteria, come home, come often, come early, right? So, you know, there's coding here about how to belong, right? So let me go to another image. So Jill talked music. And so one of the things that was going, at that music store, I assume they were selling this music sheet, right? So selling song sheets. So this is a song sheet for a song called "We Are All Loyal Klansmen." And so I'm going to use a different technique to have us do some analysis of this one. And then this will be the last one I spend in time in depth. But let's try this. This is the way I always like looking at art. And I have a good friend here who's a former curator who's on our in attending, so she can mock me later for breaking the piece down this way. But what I'd like you to do is just describe what you see, again, as objectively as possible. And you could be talking about the words or the image. So describe what you see as objectively as possible. Uncle Sam is a Klansman. Uncle Sam protected by a mob of Klan, ugly people inside and out. So you're interpreting a little bit, so stick to the details. Just stick to the details, like literally what do you see there on the page? So Allison's like, there's a moon above a dark piece. It all moves so quickly. Their hoods, lots of white, a burning cross in the background, absolutely. The Klan, so Uncle Sam supported by the Klan, right? Well, all right, so let's now take a detail. Somebody choose one detail. The flag. Okay, so why do you think that they've decided to put the flag so primary? So give it such primacy in this image. Somebody saying they need symbols. Jalana is saying that. There are 48 states at that time. Yes, the idea America first. The KKK is patriotic, right? The message is patriotism. Let's choose another detail. Why the Klan robe guys right behind Uncle Sam? Why the juxtaposition of the Klan and Uncle Sam? America first, that's interesting because they're standing there. He's the leader. They stand behind Uncle Sam. They're being American, right? So what I would do if I were in a class now, the next thing I would do is I'd have you write an overall interpretation of the piece and of the messaging. I can't not pay attention to the chorus here. So this is a chorus of the song. The entire song sheet is on, the lyrics are on the website. But we are all loyal Klansmen, as clannish as can be. We love our home, this country, and its flag of liberty. Its constitution handed down, approved by Uncle Sam, will always be defended by the Ku Klux Klan. So what do you notice in the lyrics? Just open response. What do you notice in the lyrics? You're in or you're out. America approves. We're protecting the Constitution. Sounds good because of the rhyming. Yeah, it's very simple rhyme scheme, right? Like I almost do it sing-songy by accident, right? Co-opting the flag and the Constitution. So that, you get a sense of at least parts of these stories are about telling a story of patriotism. Part of it is telling a story about there's a secret code, right? And like in those early ads, we can find a sense of belonging. Not all of it was that. There was sometimes times where the Klan turned to really negative political cartoons, right? Actually, this is an interesting story because this is a piece that the Fiery Cross ran, but it was actually originally ran in a different newspaper. So again, it's interesting how that relationship between other anti-immigrant attitudes and what the story that the Klan was telling, right? And then there's the information sheet, which it's really worth pausing on this. You'll see it on the primary source collection on the Reimagining site. But you see how they're crossing out names. And why are they crossing them out? Look, because they've done the research. They want to know who these candidates are. You'll see that it's when possible to list the name of the religion of the candidate, right? So on the far left, you'll see that Patrick Lynch is crossed out. Why? Roman Catholic, right? And there's folks who have no information. So there's, as you go through that, they've been very careful. Thomas Dexter, quote, Negro, unquote, obviously not the term we would be using today, but again, crossed out. Jill, what's ES? I can't remember.
The metadata says that it might stand for skip, like skip this candidate. And I think it's worth noting too, we've mostly seen things that have links to today and similarities to today, but look how they are crossing out people on both sides of the aisle. Like the Klan was actually willing to vote for this Republican candidate and vote for this Democratic candidate because they support white supremacy.
Thanks. So, this political advocacy. So, I mean, I can't help but think about connections, right, to the world in which we're living in right now, and what are the messages that we're taking in. And so I just literally, I just grabbed some headlines for the last couple of days, and just threw them in here, and just take a look at what we're struggling with at this particular moment. Is there's lots of asylum seekers at the U.S. border. Many more than in the last couple of months. Probably not historical highs, right? But we're going through a moment where the government is challenged to figure out how to respond to the asylum seekers who had been backed up, right, for the last several years. And so, how are people going to be responding, to these stories? And you can see already that the press is even having to start to respond to rumors. This is what rumor. The bottom one is a rumor started by the Texas governor about undocumented people coming and spreading the virus. So these health issues become very familiar. A really, really useful routine that you might look at if you're looking at journalism with students is to think about, when you pull out some articles, think about who is it by, who do we think it's for, who is it about, and who else could be in that story, or in other words, whose voices are there and whose voices are missing, right? And almost all the reporting that I've caught on the border are without the voices of migrants or immigrants themselves. So to go to this moment, though, in this moment, I think we are challenged, right? Why won't my screen go? So to go back to this, to go back to the question is, so we start to think about what is the danger when hate grows mainstream, and how does it impact how we start to respond to issues like we just saw here. So January 6th serves as a reminder about how the far right have really become part of the political mainstream, right, with the Capitol insurrection, right? And I don't have to spend a lot of time, because I'm sure you've seen the journalism here, but the guy on the left wearing at least on my left, wearing the Camp Auschwitz t-shirt, so an anti-Semitic t-shirt, but that was not the only one of these images, or white power symbols used by protesters and the January 6th insurrection, terrorist insurrection in front of the Capitol, the Confederate flag making its way through the halls of Congress, right? But that's part of the conversation the last couple of years. This is an image from Charlottesville, right? Just a couple of years before. And so the white supremacist symbols have really become much more, as the ADL is right, much more mainstream in the public dialogue. They would argue that anti-immigrant groups' bigotry has been normalized by some media. And this is a real problem, because as you start to see, it starts to shape the way that policy gets enacted, and you change the conversation. Inside the last White House, there's been good reporting that about the white nationalist websites that Stephen Miller, an immigration a quote advisor to the last president, was using. Ironically, a Jewish immigrant whose uncle was obviously Jewish as well, who's saying, hey, our family would have never been let into the country if, by the people that you're supporting. And a point to explore with it, with students, is how do leaders respond, right? Do leaders respond and condemn this moment, or do leaders accept what's going on? And so remember that the stand back and stand by, right? But how are people, what's the message to hate groups? Is a message that this is not acceptable, or is a message that you still belong? So the police hadn't taken this stuff very seriously the last couple of years, right? It's only at the only with the attack on the Capitol that the Proud Boys become something that is being targeted by the police. And in the middle of this, there's a real spike in hate crimes and in bias motivated violence. And some of it is not entirely necessarily led by white supremacists, but we know that we're all soaking up the environment right now. So as you see that anti-Asian hate is spiking right now and finally catching the news. So I share this with you as a way to start to think about what happens when hate goes mainstream, and not to say that these headlines are what happened in the 1920s. But as educators, I think it's partially our job to start to think about the continuities and discontinuities across time. So I'm going to leave you with one more thinking routine. This is called same, different, gain. So one way to help people make purposeful comparisons is by having people write, if they're making comparisons across time, to think about what is the same, what's similar, what is different, and then what is gained by making that comparison. Without kind of that structure, it's a little bit too loose. So I'm going to stop there and suggest that there are ways to address these issues, but I think one has to be careful. One has to be really clear on your teaching goals, and think a lot about structures. I used a lot of thinking routines during this, really, because I want to structure that conversation. I want to leave it open for people to respond, but also to structure.